I personally think rebellion has a lot to do with an attempt at being authentic. And I think authenticity is like the core of great music. Like, I think
Hello and welcome to Talkback On episode 20. We are a podcast show where professionals tell stories, tips, and secrets from the other side of the studio glass in K-pop. If you are new to the show, please give us a follow at Talkback On across all social media platforms and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this. Our Discord server is also in the links below. So join us in our growing community of songwriters, producers, where you can also enter future contests, giveaways, and events. Now, introducing our host, we have an award-winning hitmaker and legend status producer, Jay Chong.
Woo! Yeah. Wow, what an intro.
Our next host is an award-winning multi-platinum producer, songwriter, and CEO of Decade Plus Music Publishing, KAIROS. Woo! Woo! And I myself, KO, Chief Audio Engineer and Director of A&R. Before we introduce our special star guest for today, we have a big announcement. KAIROS will be releasing his latest sample pack by Audiobox for free on the Talkback On community. All you have to do is sign up on KAIROSmusicgroup.com and join our Discord community when we will send you the latest pack titled Paradox by KAIROS. In addition, we have an up-and-coming duo, Nother, that will feature on our latest circuit board segment to show their process using our upcoming sample packs from Audiobox. You'll not want to miss that, so stay tuned and we'll be right back.
Hey guys, we're the production duo Nother, and today we're going to be showing off a track that we made using almost exclusively sounds from the new Talkback On sample packs. I'm going to hand it off to Owen, and he's going to show you how we made the track.
Alright, let's give it a listen.
Yeah.
Awesome. So sample packs are a great way to find inspiration. This pack especially had some song starters in there. Really easy to start off a song from there and kind of take it in your own unique direction. When we were listening through, this 808 sample really caught our ear, and that's kind of what gave us the inspiration for this song. So to us, we really heard like an Itzy vibe from it. So we started looking for some drum samples to get the rhythm section built up. And the Paradox pack especially had lots of cool sounds that really fit with that vibe. As well as Jay Chong's pack had some cool little perk sounds that sounded very Itzy. So here's the track with just the bass and the drum section. So now we got the groove going, but it still needs a little bit more to really solidify the feel of the song. So we just added some extra effects here, some like sparkle sounds, and a lead in the second half. All these elements kind of pull the song together more and give it that more cohesive sound. So now we just added some vocals onto there to give it that little final touch. And here is the final track.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'll pass it off to Noah now. He'll go a little more in depth on some of the individual elements and kind of how we altered the samples to really fit in with this direction.
Hey guys, so I'm going to show you how we really got these samples to fit well in the vibe that we were going for this track. So the first thing I wanted to show you guys was this little tonal percussion. This is a pretty simple thing. It sounded like this. Let me play it for you before we did any processing. Just this kind of interesting percussion loop. So we really like the first part of it. So as you can hear here, we just cut that first part because that's what we wanted. And then we added a reverb, Valhalla Vintage Verb, to kind of give it this like chamber dark space. So you can hear that here. And when you listen to that in context, let's play it.
Yeah.
So that was with, and I'll play without now.
Yeah.
You see how the vibe and the feel of that percussion just kind of totally goes away? That's what we were really looking to enhance and heard when we heard that sound. So we make sure to draw that out and really build into the vibe of the track when we pull in a sample. The next thing that is pretty cool that we messed with a little bit was this kind of sparkle sound. Let me play that for you without any processing. So that's a pretty cool hit. We thought it already kind of sounded like Itzy, and that's what we were going for with this track. But we wanted to do a couple things, which was darken it a little bit. It stuck out a little bit too much. And then we also wanted to add this kind of delay reverb feel on it. So all we needed to do that was EQ. We pulled down the high end. And with the crystallizer, actually, we added that little delay reverb space that we wanted. So with the effects, we have this. So when we play the track with that,
Yeah.
versus without,
Yeah.
that difference is a little bit more subtle than the tonal percussion, but it's still definitely there, and it really contributes to the overall vibe of your track. The thing that I actually like best in this track is this lead sound that originally was from the Paradox pack, but we did some alterations with Greenhouse, actually. We used 2 instances of that plugin. The first instance of it, you can see on this left side, we just drove it a little bit with some distortion, cut out some of the low end, some of the high end. That's just to give it the overall feel that we wanted. Then on the right here, we messed with the stereo field to get it really sitting in an interesting way where we wanted in the track. And then with the second instance of Greenhouse, we really drove the distortion. In this, we actually did a little bit later. We didn't know we wanted to do that right away, but after we listened a few times, we really wanted this tighter lead sound that would really sit well underneath vocals. So you can see here, we took the low cut and we pulled that way up and the high cut down. So we have this more mid-focused lead, and then we drove it a bunch more into this distortion. So let's listen without Greenhouse first. So that's a super cool sound, but we wanted to make it fit just a little bit better into the track. So here's with Greenhouse. Listen to this. And in context, with Greenhouse and then without. Here's without. The other thing that we did that was really cool on this lead is we added gross beat to add this little tape stop effect throughout the sound. So if you take a listen with gross beat on, so you hear in the center there, we have this kind of tape stop sound that kind of pulls the whole beat in for a second and then it opens up again. That kind of stuff really creates special moments, especially when you add vocals. Everything kind of just comes together and feels very polished and designed. And lastly, we have this cool little fill that we made. So originally it sounded like this. A really short percussion kind of lead. But after we were done with it, we took this first half of that sound and we warped it to be a bit longer and gave it this big impact. So I'll just play that first half of the fill. That extended sound. And then on the second half, we kept it the same, so it snaps right at the end. And you hear how that really just like finishes the section. It really pulls everything together right at the end. A really cool sound. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we hope you got something out of this circuit board. But don't forget, if you go to KAIROSmusicgroup.com and sign up and join the TalkBack On Discord, you will receive the Kairos Paradox sample pack free. Make sure to do that, and we'll see you later.
Welcome back, and hope you guys enjoyed our circuit board segment. Let's introduce our guest for today. He is a multi-platinum songwriter and producer, hailing from Chicago, who has written for NCT, Stray Kids, BTOB, The Idol Coup OST, Olivia Olson from Adventure Times, and many more. Gifted as a multi-instrumentalist and vocalist who I call the one-man band, please welcome samUIL, everyone. Woo!
Woo! Woo! What's up, y'all?
We need some sound effects like
Yeah, let's put those in.
Let's take our sample pack and just put some sound effects
Just like
in.
random samples.
I just realized that's what we're missing from our podcast. Any sound effect.
Yeah, that's true.
So, one of the things we want to get to know more about you is we would like to start off with your story and of how you got here. Where and when did it all start?
Okay, so just disclaimer, like, you guys know me very well. So really, I'm talking to Jay because we don't really know each other all too well. So I'm gonna, I'm trying to tell you an authentic story, at least to somebody that I don't know. So
wait a minute,
I'm
you
just
guys all in the
that,
same house?
Yeah, it's actually right there. Yeah. But just to start it off, I guess like music wise, I was forced into piano at the age of 3, just like any Korean child, either piano or cello or violin, and played that for 8 years. And music was just kind of on the back burner of my mind at the time. It was really more about Pokemon cards and Dragon Ball Z and things that were actually fun. And then by the time I turned 11, big shocker, Kairos, he busted into the room, not because he's a random guy, but he's my brother. And he walked in with a Blink-182 album, and that was 1999. And that was the album Enema of the State. And that was like world changing for me. I'm sure it was for Kairos as well. Just the fact that there was like this world of like fun music, right? Because up until then, music was just piano, play Mozart, play Beethoven. And if you get it wrong, you're going to cry. It's like the things that were associated with music wasn't the best. And all of a sudden you hear this pop punk, distorted guitar, ridiculous drums. The vocals are so fresh, so simple, so catchy. You just want to sing along with it. The lyrics are hilarious, by the way. Like, it's not even about like she broke my heart. It's about like something like super sexual, super raunchy, which at the time when you're 11, you're like, that's when it starts getting interesting. You're like, oh, I want to hear stuff like that. Cause like up until now, it's just Sesame Street. So that's when I was like, wow, like music could be fun. Like, this is really cool. Around that same time is like when Kairos got his first electric guitar. So he was just like shredding on Metallica and stuff like that. And I was just kind of like on the side, like, wow, that's pretty sweet. And I would go to school and everyone's on to Blink-182 and all the pop punk bands as well. So there was like this huge like surge of 11, 12, 13-year-olds just getting super into punk rock music. Maybe that's just something that happens for every generation, but
was this in Chicago?
This was in Chicago. So this is Midwest, Midwestern pop punk wave, which eventually turned into, Fall Out Boy and like emo pop punk type of stuff. But at the time, it was really just about like Blink-182. Green Day, of course, kind of paved the way. And then it was like eventually like, Newfound Glory, Ataris, like all these smaller, but just as catchy, just as, punky bands. And then there's like the darker bands that I got absolutely obsessed with, which was like Alkaline Trio, some hardcore bands as well. There's like Story of the Year, which Kairos loved. So those were like that was like the background of music for us, like growing up in the Midwest. We go to school, at this point it's like high school, let's say. no Asians, right? It's like, we just live in the Midwest. We're just in a school with a bunch of white kids. Like when I see a black kid, I'm like, hey, we're alone. You know, it's like, there's like literally nobody there to actually see someone that has my face until college. So we just listened to all the Midwestern music, and it was just rock, you know, it was just punk rock. And so for me, I thought rap, and I thought K-pop especially, was lame. I thought K-pop was like the dumbest thing ever. Like, why do you need 15 members? Like, why do you need to?
I just thought that 2 days ago.
Now I know why you need 15 members. Like, I think that's great. I bought into it eventually, but then like at the time, it was just a matter of like, yo, the song has to be written by the people that are in the band. They have to be played. The instruments have to be real. Like the lyrics have to be poetic, like, or at least funny. And it has to be authentic, you know, like music has to be really authentic. And I think the reason why I liked those bands was because apart from being authentic, it was also rebellious. It was also like against what's popular, against what's normal. And, you know, growing up in a town that, you know, you automatically don't look normal. And not to say like we received hate like all the time or something like that. It wasn't necessarily like that, but, you know, you stood out. And for you to kind of feel like, oh, wow, like there's like music that kind of stands out and like is okay with not being normal, is okay with being a little bit weird. And that's the merit of the music itself, really attracted me. So, you know, I was really into that rebellious type of music. And then, so I didn't like K-pop. I thought K-pop was like a very, what is it? What's that word? We just go with the grain.
I'm just
I just thought it was very conformist. I thought it was like a very conformist type of music. It's just very like sweet, sugary melodies and pop and all that. And it's very safe. That's what I thought. Like my preconceived notion.
You're talking like early 2000s, late 90s, right?
Yeah, early 2000s, late 90s. Yeah. I can't say that about like early 90s, especially in front of you. But at the same time, like I just can't say that because it was still really innovative at the time, like early 90s.
I think the K-pop scene in the late 90s was kind of like I don't know. Like I think when like Sateji, Deuce, Solid, like we all left at the same exact time. I think we literally had the same press conference and we all bounced, right? and then I think it just kind of left everybody trying to figure out what's next, and then so
all
it was
those
kind
groups.
of a weird transitional time.
Yeah, and all those like boy groups
like,
and girl groups started sprouting up.
Yeah, and then I don't know if you guys remember IMF, right? It was like the worst. Like you know, the country was like basically just there was a huge financial crisis. In 98 till when was it, like 2001 or something like that? Like that was like literally like the dark period of K-pop, I think. Like nothing worked. Like CDs didn't sell. Like people weren't even buying like bootleg CDs. Like people were so broke. Right?
That's what I mean. Maybe I was on board with the same type of attitude because like maybe not because of IMF per se, but I just thought like the music at the time was super lame. Yeah. And like I also thought American music at the time was super lame too. Like in early 2000s and stuff, like the whole like Ja Rule, like you know that whole crazy that whole wave of like super colorful like like wearing FUBU all the time. But then like apart from the dress, like just the music itself, I was like, this is so lame. Like rap is supposed to be rebellious. It's supposed to be like in your face. Like it doesn't have to be about like murder and gang activity, but it has to be like pushing the boundaries. And this was just like, let's make hits. And hits, like after a while, once you start following a pattern, it becomes safe. And that's kind of how I perceived it. Yeah. And so I was sticking with punk, and then eventually I like slid over to experimental rock music, which is like Radiohead. And like eventually I went to the origins of experimental rock, which is actually the Beatles. Like they're the ones that experimented with tape, you know, speeding it up, slowing it down, like different ways to record, especially because at the time they were recording with a 4-track. So how do you record a full-on orchestra, bass, you know, drums, guitar, and vocals, and harmonies, everything, and fit it into a 4-track? It's like they just had to work with what they had. It was innovative. And so and the experimentation kind of boiled over to Pink Floyd, you know, like Queen and all that, and then eventually to Radiohead in the 90s. And when I heard Radiohead, my life was just changed. Because I was like, yo, this band, like people know them for Creep, but that's not what Radiohead is. Like Radiohead is just like this. It's punk rock from outer space. That's basically what it is. It's not even like rock music, but they use guitars. But when I heard that, I was like, wow, this is true rebellion. This is true expression. This is like, we don't care about selling records. In fact, our first single off of our third album is going to be 6 minutes long, which was Paranoid Android for OK Computer. And it became a success. It became like number one, I think. And their career catapulted. And all the while I'm listening to like hip hop and K-pop on the side. I'm like, this is garbage compared to what I'm listening to. Like my taste is superior. And then eventually in college, I started listening to 소녀시대 and 21, you know, because I was like, what is all the hype about all this stuff? Like, why do you need 9 members? And then I started watching their music videos, and then I realized really quick why you need 9 members. But 21, I really like them more for their songs. Their songs were just super, super catchy and like just hooks left and right. And I realized like K-pop, the difference is they hit you with a hook when American music tends to hit you with jabs and then a hook every now and then. K-pop is just like hooks only. It's just like big throws only and constantly in your face. And you're just like, I can't even resist this. Like, this is just like such irresistible, catchy music that I don't care if there's 9 members or 30 members. It doesn't even matter if that guy has a weird haircut or, you know, they act really weird or whatever. It doesn't matter. The music is just so good. And that's when I had to acknowledge, wow, to some degree, this is where the envelope is being pushed. This is where the rebellion is happening. Regardless of whether Korea thought of it that way or not, pop music was being revolutionized in that small peninsula. And the rebellion was happening over there. So I just saw that as like, that's pretty punk rock too, you know? And so,
it's interesting you say that. Yeah. Cause like, you know, when I think of actually like the kind of like the 90s era of K-pop was rebellious. Cause like before then, you know, like the guys didn't wear, I remember like, you know, Solid or REF or Sateji, and, you know, like everyone wore the overalls, you know, and the baggy pants. And I mean, we're bringing culture and we're merging cultures and, or I should say introducing culture, you know, to Korea. And I feel like at the time, even though I wasn't there, I imagined there to be some kickback, you know. I imagine there to be people saying, no, this is not Korea, you know, this is you know. So like to some degree you know, I see that being kind of a rebellious music at the time. What do you guys think about that? I think
absolutely, like the late 90s, like I said, it was kind of like when Korea sort of went off the grid, you know. If you look back to the late 90s, you had groups like, you know, like One Time, you had Uptown doing like straight up gangster rap, like you know, shout out to my boy Carlos, Uptown. But you know, like they're straight up doing English raps with profanity and everything. They don't do that anymore in Korea. Like I mean, there's hip hop, but it's not like, you know, there's like some serious guys from LA out there like rapping like LA culture with, you know, the whole, you know, the G-funk and all this stuff in the late 90s. And, you know, you had like Tiger JK come from, you know, LA as well. Like there's a lot of rap in the late 90s, I think, in Korea that was not really, and that rap was mainstream. It was on mainstream TV. It was like the M Countdown, and they would have like 20 rap groups, you know, all wearing Timberlands and baggy clothes and, you know, doing that stuff at that time. Not so much anymore. Now it's just become sort of like this whole idol culture, but I think late 90s to early 2000s, there's a lot of variety. Like there's no real like pathway for K-pop or what it was. Like there's no identity. Like I think they were just trying to figure things out, right? So there's a lot more rebellions, just people doing things that people would not normally do today, you know, like musically.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's like, oh, sorry.
Oh no, wasn't Psy part of that too? Like he was like making
Psy.
He was rapping a lot about like the government and the way how things were.
And even like Sateji back in the 90s, like, you know, he was always talking about education system and how kids, you know, like it's always about rebellion, like going against the system. You know, that's what I actually really identify with what you said. because I'm the same way. I grew up with rock music ever since I was a kid. You know, I got hooked on guitars. Everything's about anti-establishment. A rebellion. I had this conversation with artists recently. And I said, artists should not bend over backwards to please people. That's not what artists do. Like, you got to stick to your art and you stick to what you believe in. And if people believe in it and follow you, great. If not, you just, say F you and just move on, right?
Right, because artists are essentially leaders. Like, they're leaders. And can you imagine if a leader were to be like, hey, like, does this please you? Like, that's not leading.
Exactly. Yeah. And I always thought artists is the one that should be leading pop culture, not be led by the public. Right. Because
the public can give you a demand, but they only demand what they know already. But art is all about like presenting what's unknown and going into that dark place where people are like, well, so I think that is what K-pop is, or at least was, and they are continuing to do, through some companies. And when I see K-pop, that's kind of like the way that I feel. I'm like, wow, this is kind of like the punk rock of Korea. Of course, it's mainstream. Of course, there's like huge corporations around it and all that. But does that make it any less pop or like punk rock? Like, does it make it any less rebellious? The style itself, the art itself, expresses it in a way where it makes you start like questioning what's normal. Like when you listen to songs from SM, like the reason why I like SM, do I like it because they're so popular? No, they're popular for a reason. They're popular because it challenges people. It makes people feel, makes people get in touch with a side of them that's a little more primitive, depending on the group, like NCT, for example. And when I see that, I'm like, that's punk rock. That is the same thing as when I heard Blink-182 or when I heard Alkaline Trio, or eventually later on when rock music turned super square and rap took over in SoundCloud. That rap became the punk rock of the next generation, with XXX Tentacion, even before that with Lil Wayne. Just like the fact that guy just like says whatever, and it's just like amazing poetry, and every single one of his bars are freestyle. Like, that's just unbelievable genius, and his beats are just crazy. Like, the way he flows is incredible. Like, it's just true art. And so eventually I came to the point where I recognized that about K-pop, and I hope K-pop continues to push the envelope, and to whatever degree, I'm sure we all have the same hope of contributing to that.
Oh, we all know Jaehyung was in an iconic group called Solid, and Kairos used to play in a band. Now, did you all really wanted to get signed, or was it somewhat to impress the ladies out there?
Well, back in our day, I'm just kidding. I think a lot of it was, I think one thing I found out very young was when I played the guitar, it was very popular with the girls, right? And I think if you look at the history of any great band in the 80s or 70s, they just basically started out in a garage, just jamming with some neighborhood friends, and then they found out it's a very fun thing to do, right? And I think we always had that sort of fantasy about being a rock star, because growing up in the 80s and 90s and seeing all these big bands, like we thought just being a rock star is like the coolest thing you could do, right? So but like for me, like us three becoming a group was sort of a reluctant thing. We were just in the studio. I was producing a group in the early 90s. And, the other guy, John from my group who raps, came in, wrote the raps, did the demos and things like that. And George, Kim Johan, the singer, he came in and sang choruses and things like that. And then the manager was like, hey, why don't you three guys put a group together? And it just like, hey, we grew up together. We never even thought about that, right? And we just kind of started that way. But I think if I look back, I don't think money was ever the objective. I think, back in the older days, it was like, I want to have a CD out, Do you remember those days? Just having my own CD. It's like I hang it, hand it out to my friends or whatever, tell my friends about it. That was like the biggest bragging right, just to have a CD out, right?
And be signed by you.
Yeah. He was just like, so that's pretty much how we started. you know. And I used to play in garage bands, you know, in my high school, even starting from junior high, you know, and then we used to play like just shows all over town. Back when I was in like I think like in 8th grade or something, you know. I remember like my band was like, so I was in 7th grade and we had some 8th grade members, and then we went to Disneyland one day, and then we walked into the main office inside the park. And then we're like, hey, we want to talk to whoever's in charge of that stage over there. And then this old guy, this guy came out. And he's like, what do you kids want? Like, we want to play there. Like, and the guy just looked at us and just laughed. And then we're just like, why is this guy laughing at us? And then thinking about it, it's like we're like a bunch of 7th graders, like just barging into an office, you know. But yeah, it was just joy of playing in a band together, and it was kind of like. Yeah, like Sam was saying, it's all about like anti-establishment. We want to like kind of like have our own voice. We want to talk about stuff. Just you know, like I grew up watching like Motley Crue, like Van Halen, like just trashing a hotel room during tours. You know, Ozzy Osbourne, like doing crazy stuff. So that's something that for me, growing up here as a kid, you obviously. First of all, you see bands who are writing their own songs and performing their own songs. You have a band, you have super bands, right? Where they actually play the instruments in the album, right? Right. I have a recent post on my Facebook of this group called Kaja Gugu back in the 80s, right? And this guy playing this guy is analyzing the bass line from that song, how amazing it is, right? And you look at the video, and this dude looks like a model. Right? He's like a good-looking dude, and he's playing an instrument. Like Duran Duran, right? Remember Duran Duran? You got 5 guys that look like supermodels, and they all rip on their instruments, right? So to me, that was like sort of the standard, So like Sam was saying, like when I saw for the first time like 12 guys on stage, all holding a mic, you're like, what's going on? Right. It took a while to get used to be honest with you. Right. And then, and then, me being from that industry, I know the kind of like where it's built, you have producers, which most of them are from my generation, actually, like JYP, YG, all those, Young, all those guys are from my generation. And we were the first generations to actually be an artist and producer, right? That produced the next generation. And then so like that's the new era, like where all the kids are just kind of like under a care of a mega producer, right? Right. So that took a long time to get used to, actually. I'm not gonna lie. To me at that time, I just felt like it went against everything I personally believed in as a musician and an artist. Like here in the US labels, it's like, it pretty much goes against every paradigm, right? That's set up here in the US. Like you have to be authentic. You have to have your real story. You can't fake it. Right? Then now it's become, even in the US right now, it's become like that. It's like very few artists are about that life. Like, nobody's repping any kind of lifestyle. It's just they're trying to make pop music, right?
Right.
And then, so now the culture is sort of supporting that whole, setup. So like K-pop right now is sort of like right in the heart of it. Like, being very well curated, very well produced. It's like we're seeing like 1980s kind of budgets on a pop band in 2023, right? Which is crazy, right? Because every artist out here in the US is scaling back.
Right.
They're not spending any money on artists. Like major labels are spending like practically nothing on artists, right? And you got Korean artists spending like, $500,000 on a music video, and you wonder why that's popping in the culture. Like it's just, you're getting so much better quality stuff.
It's how I got into like when we're talking about bands and stuff, like Sam and I, we actually grew up in a town where it was like, it's kind of like the movies, where you see the kids like playing in the backyard, the cops come and you start running from the cops, and like if you want to go to a show, you just like literally this is what we did in high school. If one of us found out that a band was playing in town, you know, and we didn't have like phones and like iPhones, you know, and like someone was like checking online in the library, and then they'll scream down the hallway, hey, you know, so-and-so is playing this tonight. And then everyone would hear down the hallway, and then, you know, all of us will just hop on the next train. We'll go downtown, and somehow we come back like on the train with our shirts. Like we lose our shirts somehow, you know, and we're all just drenched, and we're like, you know, came out of a rock show and go home. And it's just so memorable. And we did that almost like every weekend. But I feel like in many ways, like that does, like influence the taste that we have. Like, I feel like even the group right now here, we have like unique taste because like all the things that influenced us, you know, back in the day, or just even the way, the environment that we were surrounded by, it really kind of shaped the sounds that we, I think, apply to, you know, just production or songwriting, top lining, whatever the case may be. And, you know, I think that's where it really comes from. So it's really cool we're talking about this, because like even as I'm hearing stories, I'm reminded of all these like little ventures, you know, and little like moments that I think it still sticks with me today, you know.
Yeah, wow. That's part of the I guess, you know, growing up here in the U.S. You know, I meet a lot of kids in Korea where, you know, I mean, like when I first went to Korea, like I had a lot of respect for people who were doing like hip hop and things like that in the early 90s, because it wasn't readily available to anybody. Like they literally had to dig through the underground, you know, maybe travel to Japan and, you know, buy magazines, trying to find clips of Run DMC, or, you know, all these little things to learn about what's going on. And I remember running into Iando, you know, from Juice. And he gave me a whole earful about like the history of like all these bands, you know, hip hop groups, you know, starting from like Run DMC, Salt and Peppa, and like all these groups. And I was like, how do you know all this stuff? Right. And he just knew it because he was reading these magazines that he found, like, right. They had to dig and find information. Whereas, you know, us, you know, it's just kind of like, you know, we get in a car, if we turn on the radio, we hear hip hop or, you know, whatever, rock or anything that we want to hear. It's on the radio. Right. Just having that and living, you know, going to public schools here and, you know, dealing with the culture, like just the subcultures in the schools, right? So you got like, you know, when you're eating lunch, you got the, you know, the hip hop guys over there, the punk rockers, skaters, you know, everybody's like kind of broken up into different genres, and being able to like navigate, right, through that. It's kind of like where we get our inspiration from. Like a lot of people, you know, ask like, hey, how do you write so many songs? Because we tap into these like subcultures that we're so familiar with, right? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I
feel like a lot of that,
yeah,
like rebellious, like rock music we listened to growing up, it translates over to the pop music we're trying to make. Because like if we're doing pop correctly, we're doing it in a way that that moves you as the maker of the song as well, right? It has to affect you. It can't just be like, I'm going to make it the way that it's already been made because that's the template for it. And it's like, if you do that, I guess you can make like a cohesive pop song, but it's already been done before. So like, what is it within you that keeps you interested in music in the first place? And can you incorporate that into this new genre that you're trying to sell a song for? And it's like, if you can do that properly, then I'm not saying you're guaranteed to get a cut, but you're guaranteed to have probably a one of a kind song in that genre, you know, because it's like you're combining your unique tastes and implementing it into this art. And if everyone were to do that, that's what I would personally call songwriting done correctly, you know? And I just feel like it's such a waste of time and talent for people to try and make songs that are pleasing to other people, to try and sell the song. Is this the type of song you're looking for? I hope it is. It's like you do that, 1,000 other people are trying to do that. And trust me, it's not unique. And I say that not like condescendingly. I've done that for many years. Like I'm like, oh, like we're trying to sell songs. Maybe I should try to make songs that are like super sellable then. And you do that, and it's like, it's just super safe, you know? Like, why would they take a risk on a song that's super safe?
Then you find yourself crying in the shower at night.
Yeah, exactly. Singing that safe melody.
Yeah, it's just like, I can't live with myself. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think finding that right balance of like, you know, like integrity and, you know, and paying bills. Like you got to make a living, right? A lot of us are doing this as a career.
Yeah.
So, sometimes like, man, like I've done projects where like, obviously, I don't really talk about it in public. And my theory is like this, right? My thing is like when people ask like, hey, should I do this or this project or this project? I'm like, do everything, because when it flops, nobody will know anything about it. Right. And if it hits, people will know about it. Things that flop, it'll just disappear. It'll just like on its own. Right. So like you just do it. I've done like trot music before, with just some old ass, like 60, 70-year-old dudes. Like I've been in the studio doing that stuff. I've done like just, I've even done like the national baseball theme out in Taiwan, like, like just random stuff, man, random stuff. And, like as a musician, I try to do as much as I can, like, different things. And I actually enjoy the process. Do I really like the genre or whatever, sometimes it's just to do it, but it's challenging in itself. But, a lot of it, just sort of like disappears. So, I hope somebody doesn't dig that up. Like
they might.
But like there's a lot of times we got to do stuff that we don't sometimes believe in, like musically, right? Yeah. And you're like, sure. And to be honest with you, I think I felt like that for like 90% of the music out in Asia that I've done. I would never listen to this on myself, but we do it and when you do stuff like that, you actually kind of broaden your palette. Yeah. Right. And like right now, if you look at K-pop is a mixture of a lot of different things. There's trap beat in there, there's rap, there's EDM, there's like everything in there, right? If you're just good at one thing, your shelf life in K-pop is going to be very short, right? Mm-hmm. You got to be able to evolve and constantly put in new elements, and then like when you're in a room with other writers, like you got to be able to like adapt and understand what they're trying to go for, and just and write a song in like an hour or two, or right. At least like 5 songs, right, in an hour or two with these people, right? And that's kind of like where the market's at right now. So,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I kind of feel like there's going to be a lot of stuff. I mean, bills are obviously important. You got to pay rent, or you got to pay off the mortgage or whatever. And that's going to force you to be at a fork in the road, right? You're going to have to think about, well, I want to write what I want to write. But on the other hand, I have to write what's demanded, right? And I think you bring up an interesting scenario because it broadens your horizon. So you write a song that you theoretically don't like a genre that you're not interested in. But there's no way that you cannot put a piece of yourself into that. And it's your musical influence is just still injected into that, so that it's no longer that genre, generally speaking. It's actually like a little twist. It's a little spritz of like your influences that's being sprinkled into there. And I feel like that is like the fun part of doing songwriting assignments, right? It's like, I mean, I personally don't really like, I'm not offended, when people say this, but like, when someone's a producer or when someone's like a top liner, it's like, is that all that they are? I really see them as song craftsmen. Like everyone's like a craftsman. Like a song isn't just like you just put it together. Like it's like a craft. It's like building an amazing, like for me, I'm really into watches. It's like building a watch. Like all those little gears have to fit perfectly into each other. No mistakes whatsoever. All the spacing, everything has to be aligned for it to even tick in the first place. And it's like for a song to come together, and there's no such thing as like a right or wrong answer in music when it comes to creativity. But when it comes together and it just feels right and it hits at the right times and the dynamics are perfect, the build is amazing, the drop is ferocious. It's just like, that's great craftsmanship, and I feel like Absolutely. That's the aim that we have as songwriters. And that type of thing is what we're trying to do by also putting a little bit of ourselves into it. Like the way that we like to drop, the way we like to build, the way we like to confuse and delay the gratification of that resolve in a chord or whatever it is, So I think we're just going off on a tangent here, but yeah.
At the end of the day, we're all like in the business of selling art, right?
Exactly.
And we're in the music business, and a lot of times, with all these conglomerates now getting involved in the music business, we talk about IPOing the company, so like a lot of people forget that it's at the end of the day, we're selling music, right? And then you got really creative people in the studios creating this music on behalf of these big companies, right? Like I guarantee 99% of these guys working for these corporations could never write a song in their life, right? And I think, we all have a unique talent that could actually, bring happiness to the community and, through music. And, I think a lot of that gets lost because there's so much like focus on like achievements of companies, like, hey, now we're becoming the biggest company, that's all good and everything. But I think, when it comes down to it, I think we really need to sort of like, also, I mean, this is kind of maybe off the tangent, but like just having some sort of an identity as K-pop as well. I think we're kind of like losing that in the mix because of all the business side of it, right? And just kind of like, I think we talked about this many times in the past where, we feel like there's certain things that make K-pop, and now it's that part is kind of like no longer there because it's not made by those people anymore. Right? It's made by like everybody outside of the scene now, right? I mean, that could be us too because we're out here stateside. Like now we're sort of the outsiders, right? They're tapping into, but yeah, that's something we've been talking about, and I think just like you said, like putting our DNA into the music that makes K-pop what it is, essentially, and it's these creative communities that's putting together the music for like these conglomerates, right?
It's funny that you guys kind of mentioned, especially just about DNA and stuff. Like, I grew up pretty much not really like thinking of music as anything other than something I was forced to do. I played the saxophone growing up, and it wasn't until the introduction of jazz music, where it really got me really actually loving playing the saxophone. And that was the only time where I was able to actually have a girlfriend because of it. I think I was like eighth grade, and I played a jazz solo and then I found out through my friends saying that, that girl has a huge crush on you. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
But that it's true. It was something where it's just what I loved about it was being able to like play the instrument for fun for once. Like I wasn't forced by my conductor to say or play like, oh, you have to play this at a very low volume and then crescendo up, etc., or slow down. Honestly, I kept playing little riffs in there and always got in trouble by my teacher. But then jazz music was somewhere where he's like, just break the rules. You can speed up, slow down, however fast or slow you want. And when it came to improv solos, that was like when I was like, let's go, baby. So that was that, as you said, like just the rebellious nature of that, just being able to play without any kind of boundaries almost and be creative with it was kind of like the puzzle piece that I really like to kind of figure things out with. But yeah, especially with how we're able to put that in our music today, that's definitely kind of, just breaking new rules almost in a sense, and I think that's definitely a cool goal for everybody, for any creators to reach, because sometimes I feel like we're kind of, you guys said, like serving what's on the market out there rather than being inventive and trying to think as like I keep trying to say like investors.
Innovative.
Yeah, being innovators to invent new ideas rather than just trying to play it safe.
I remember like when I was in a band, backstage, I would play like John Mayer stuff, just to kind of like warm up my fingers or whatever. And I just loved the stuff that he was making at the time. And I remember one of my buddies came across and he kind of like, laughed and, whatever, like, he's like, we're at a punk rock concert, what are you doing playing John Mayer? but he saw that all the girls were like sitting, you know, around me because they wanted to hear the John Mayer stuff. And then 1 week later, he's playing John Mayer stuff backstage, you know. And but I just remember thinking like John Mayer is kind of like the rebellious pop music, you know, because it's I mean, aside from his singles, I guess, but if you go kind of more into deeper realms of his music, it's really interesting, you know, how he explores. Just, I mean, he's an incredible musician, and I think he's one of the best guitarists, like even now, you know. But just seeing like what he was doing then, and kind of almost tricking everyone into, you know, hearing and seeing like what his art was really like, you know, through like, you know, popular advertising or just kind of like the mainstream export and all that stuff. Like he was able to kind of express or get himself to a point in his career where he can do whatever he wants, right? But he's always had that. I feel like, and that's probably a part of the reason why he's so successful. And I think just even the way we approach music, and as we've been discussing, like the rebellious nature, I think is actually an important part of how you approach to music, rather than just follow the shadows of someone that's already done it, you know.
Mm.
Yeah, like I think in general, like when I, you know, write a song, I you know, of course you look at the references. They give you references, they give you leads, you study it, and they give you songs to kind of model your creativity with. But when I write a song, and maybe this is attributed to, you know, the many rejections that I've had in my life as well, but I want it to be a little too much. Like when the A&R hears it, I want them to be a little bit like taken aback when they hear it. Not just like, wow, that's just like a great, comfortable listen. Like if that's what they want, then they're probably not going to get that from me. If they really ask me to do that, I guess I could. But naturally, my inclination is more toward like, let's be a little bit offensive with this. Like, let's make it a little too like in your face, a little too aggressive in this area. Make it a little too quiet over here. You know, like have a little too little transition there, make it a little too abrupt, or like whatever it is, you know, too choppy. I wanted to have a little bit of that TOO, a little too, like a little excessiveness in there, so that it's polarizing essentially. It's a little punk rock. That's what it is. You know, polarizing music is punk rock. And when I listen to K-pop of today, especially the huge groups, you know, you look at NCT. When I first heard them, you know, back in 2016 or so, I was like, there's no music like this. Like I thought K-pop was just this. I put it in this box, and I was like, oh shoot, they're like chanting. Oh, on top of the chanting, they're also harmonizing. Oh shoot, on top of that, they're doing this. They're doing like Picardy thirds, like doing, you know, borrowing major third notes from while they're in a minor key, flat sevens, stuff like that. It's just like straight up neo soul now, but then it's also like, you know, grimy bass going on everywhere. Like, what is going on here? And they're just straight up really rapping, not just like simple rap, but like they actually have flow. You know, it's like, I'm like, this is next level K-pop. I'm not just trying to toot NCT's horn or SM's horn. They could have been from any company. And if I heard that, I was like, I would have been like, this is just like next level stuff. And I was on board since then with what they were doing. And I was following them ever since then. And I was just like, wow, like this is like some innovative stuff. And lo and behold, everyone's trying to be like them. Like everyone's putting in chants. Everyone's like trying to do all the like the major third stuff now. You know, it's like such a SMMO. Like who knows what SM's going to think of to try and grow out of that now that that's already established as a norm, you know? And I'm very excited to see what that might be, because I know that company, they tend to look toward what can we do to kind of like push it. And I really admire that mindset, because it goes back to when we were 11 and 12. We want to hear things that are just like novelties, that are a little bit aggressive, a little bit offensive, makes you feel like, wow, it's okay to be a little bit weird, you know?
I think another good example is Stray Kids. Because I feel like Stray Kids, especially because, you know, the way Pangchan, he approaches music and the way he sees music is very different from, you know, the cookie cutter way of writing music. You know, it's almost like, you know, like there was that one time where we went to JYP, and then, you know, they said, you know, can we try something weird? And then we pulled out some of our weirdest stuff, you know, from our folder.
Yeah, mine was too weird. Like they didn't like it at all. I could tell.
Yeah,
it's just bad.
And we just tried like a lot of just random, like not random. It's something that we thought might be too weird for K-pop. But what ended up happening was that they actually wanted to develop that, or they ended up taking it, and saying we really want to wrap ideas around this particular idea, or like a production, and so. I think thinking outside the box is always good. I think the real trouble or challenge is like understanding how to step outside the box. Because I think a lot of times when we say, think outside the box, you got to, but people are in many ways like they're still figuring out what's inside the box, and then they're like, how do I go outside the box?
That's why you got to be a student of the game. You got to like study that first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that maybe that, and kind of going back to what I was saying about like K-pop in the 90s, I feel like that's why during that period, like we needed, something new, something different, something that even if we're borrowing things from different cultures, like, having rap, like, in the way that was done at the time with R&B music and, all this stuff happening, in the 90s, I feel like needed to happen for like K-pop today, for the Stray Kids and the NCTs to happen, so sure. Yeah, that's kind of my perspective on that.
Yeah, I think there has to be that norm established, and that norm was once a rebellion at a certain point. And all rebellions are temporary because it once it catches on and a revolution occurs, it suddenly becomes no longer a revolution. It's like, well, this is the norm now. Everyone likes this now. And then you got to kind of push it further. And that's why I think like, a group like New Jeans, for example, like, everyone loves New Jeans. Is it punk rock? Not at all. But the attitude of it, what they're trying to do, making K-pop minimal all of a sudden, super minimal compared to that overproduced, highly harmonized type of stuff that we're used to. That's pretty punk rock in its nature. Like the idea behind it, the attitude behind it. Flip it upside down. Give them exactly what they don't expect. Super minimal melodies, like super minimal production. And I love that. And I just feel like K-pop is continuing to challenge itself and growing in that degree. And so, I have to constantly be in awe of what K-pop is doing. Not because I'm just a K-pop fan. Like, I just really love great music and great art. And I feel like K-pop is embodying that energy and that spirit of like, this is art. We're pushing the boundaries. We're always challenging what's normal. And I'm sure millions of people out there, agree. Like that is why they like K-pop.
To me, okay, so like, Rebellious Art was our second album. Like our first album, prior to our first album, I've never actually been to Korea. After I moved there to the U.S. as a kid. So like I had, and I never consumed Korean music at all. So I had no idea. And the thing is, I didn't really want to know because I didn't want to sound like everybody else. I didn't want that to sort of influence me to make music a certain way. So I just kind of like our first album was literally just demos that I had in my 4-track. I just put it all together and made it into an album. Right. And then the second album, Rebellious, was when I actually spent some time in Korea. And I was working with producer Kim Young-suk, who's like the mega producer. And he was kind of coaching me on what are the nuances of Korean music? Like what makes, like Korean music what it is, right? So if you listen to Rebellious, it sounds very pop at the beginning. And then there's like, na, 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 na. Like that's very Korean. Like, those chords. I used to never use those kind of chords in R&B. It was a very distinctively Korean sounding chords. Like to me, I was trying to make the most Korean sounding song I could possibly write. Yeah. Right? That was the assignment. Like, okay, your first album flopped because it sounded too American. People can't relate to it. Second album, it was kind of like after spending about a year there and kind of like scoping out the scene, listening to music, I was heavily into like Yoon-sang and all these people that are just writing really intricate melodies. And I tried to incorporate some of that into that song. And that's how Rebellious kind of came about. It was kind of like my attempt to make Korean song. and it just sort of ended up where that ended up. So it's kind of like a fusion of Korean music and American music, right? Because for me, I was just trying to figure out how to write a Korean song,
right,
as Korean sounding as possible at the time, right? And that's how we came up with that song. And it was sort of like at that time, like like David Foster stuff was really, really big, and it was kind of like, oh, I want to make this very big power ballad with like an 808 drum and some Moog bass and like that whole arrangement, right? And it was just kind of like where it ended up. Obviously I wasn't as good as David Foster, and it ended up like a lot of the arrangements that I did back then, I listen to it now, I'm like, oh God,
But before that, like, I honestly don't remember hearing a kick and a snare come in like that, and maybe that's because at the time, like, obviously I've been around like studios as much as I have now, but just seeing that kind of hit the radio or and in my case, Kyle Top 10, back in the day. But that's just like, it was something that I felt like was different because it didn't have to hit like right from the one,
you know what? Okay. I think I remember now. Okay. So back in the early 90s, late 80s. So there's a song called My by Johnny Gill. Do you remember that song? My. Anyway, there's a lot of songs that started with just the drums, and just kind of like, and like very like kind of like wide, ethereal, kind of like electric piano, and just kind of gradually building into a full arrangement. Same with like New Edition, like Can You Stand the Rain, right? Yeah. And it starts with like that, the whole bass, and everything comes in. So there's a lot of those kind of songs at that time, and I think that's pretty much what I was going for. Oh. Yeah, so like New Edition, I was heavily influenced by like Babyface, David Foster, Teddy Riley, of course, like, so like 90s was sort of the introduction to the mega producers, right? Like, of course, other than like Quincy Jones, like Babyface to me was like probably the biggest influence at that time. Take a listen to Johnny Gill's My. You go, oh, it sounds kind of like it's the same kind of intro. Yeah.
Here's something that I want to see if I could get your thoughts on. A lot of, obviously our careers, as well as, especially when it comes to making pop music, we're also trying to sell it to, or have a lot of the younger generation listen to it. As we were talking about the rebellious nature, do you think, especially with music today, it needs more of that? Because I've seen a lot of ways how people try to guess trends. One of them I will name is like doing a lot more genre switch ups. But my personal take on that was always thinking that I think the younger generation just got bored of our music in a sense. So, do you guys think it needs more of that rebellious nature of trying something different versus trying to mix up what we have currently?
But I personally think rebellion has a lot to do with an attempt at being authentic. And I think authenticity is like the core of great music. Like, I think, like in the past, like Nirvana and stuff like that, like it's just super simple chords, super simple band. It's just a 3-piece band, highly distorted, simple melodies. But why did it speak to the masses? It's because it's just so authentic. Like, they're not trying to hide anything. They're just super raucous, like crazy aggressive, and they're also funny, geeky, like goofy. Like they're not trying to like be like, hey, look at us, we're this way, And I feel like when you are your authentic self, then someone is going to relate to that. And I feel like music is that way too. Like, you try to put a bunch of genres together, it's like a buffet. Like, is it really great at one thing? No, you just have like a smorgasbord of a bunch of stuff that like kind of satisfies your need for that a little bit. Like, my personal taste is just do one thing very well, like in terms of writing a song. Like In and Out, you go there for the burger. It's just like nothing more, like they're very good at that. And it's like, can you be excellent at that one thing and be really authentic and express a part of yourself through it that's very real? Then a lot of people are going to connect with that. And that might come off as rebellious. That might come off as like, oh, that's not usual. that might come off as like, hey, that's not what usually sells or whatever. And you know what? That might be the case. You might be proven wrong, because I'm not just saying like you have to just be authentic to yourself and only make songs that you like. Because let's say your taste sucks, then like no one's going to buy it. It's like, first you got to do the homework of refining your taste. Like you have to make yourself not a musical peasant. You have to go out and listen to everything and figure out, if you don't like something, you got to figure out why you don't like it either. It's like a lot of people, when you ask them like, hey, do you like this band? They're like, nah. It's like, well, name me two of their songs. They won't be able to. So how do you know you dislike them? You got to know their stuff to actually dislike it. So like, do your homework and know what you like, know what you dislike, know why you dislike and like those things. And you could incorporate it into your taste, building your preferences, your artistic preferences, how you like to use the tools in your toolbox. And when you actually craft a song with all those backing knowledge, in the background of your mind, it becomes a work of art. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Like I'm just like trying to like just go off of like what I'm feeling here, but like I feel like that is really what it is that makes great music, and it doesn't really have to be much more than that. In me trying to make music that is just really authentic, does it cost me placements? Like, I feel like it probably does. Like, maybe it's not for everybody. Maybe I have a certain style that like wouldn't really work for like a bubblegum sugary pop group. And maybe I have to learn how to do that a little better. Like, I'm not saying like just be stubborn and just be one way, but as a philosophy, I think it's very important to, like challenge what's normal, challenge what's usual, because once something is normal and usual, it's just not as interesting anymore. So you have to always be challenging that, because you might strike gold and make a very interesting song.
Yeah, and I think artists or musicians should always, push it, and try to kind of push the game forward, And I know, like a lot of trends change based on what they call the big data, right? The big corporations, they run the whole, the data system and AI and all this to figure out what's popular. Unfortunately, one thing AI can't predict is like what's next. They can pretty much go on what they've seen, possibly a pattern. But the beauty of art is that human-made art is that sometimes you get hit with something from the left field that you never thought would ever happen, and it becomes the biggest thing, right? And I think we have to always try to like make progress and try to evolve the music, push it forward. Otherwise, I hate to sound like very pessimistic or negative, but like I don't really respect artists that doesn't challenge progress, and push things forward. Like people who just constantly stay in the safe zone. So like when people hit me up and go, "Hey, can you make me the piano ballad with strings?" And there's a million guys that do that in Korea. Like, why are you asking me to do that, right? Right. So like I want to at least like. It should, every song that I do, I want people to go, "Oh wow, that sounds like kind of cool, like different," and maybe that could like push things forward. Even scaling things back, like New Jeans, right? Mm-hmm. When everybody's going extra, even makeup and hair and everything's extra, and then they're scaling everything back. I remember having a meeting in 2011 with a very big record company, and I said, "Do you know how, like in Korea?" Everybody's good looking. Everybody's tall. Everybody can dance. Everybody can sing, right? Like, do you know how to stand? Like, how do you stand now from there, right? And they're like, how? I go, don't be that. Right? It's that simple, right? Right? And sometimes it is that. Like, you have to sort of like, even that's progress. Like, sometimes scaling back is even progress, right? Just giving it like a little variety. Like, I think like, the trend of having multiple genres in one song, it's nothing new. It's been done ever since like HOT, like in the 90s, like it's been done. Like they've been doing everything, I think like, the thing is like, I think people in the music industry and also the audience feel like they've seen and heard everything. And, we all know music is infinite. Like there's so much more like when you think you know something, there's so much more, right? And I think like a lot of like music consumer, because I remember meeting a producer friend of mine in Korea, and he's like, there's nothing to listen to these days, right? There's like nothing good anymore. I'm like, dude, there's so much amazing music on Spotify that is like just every single day, right? Like you could spend hours listening to like brand new sounding stuff. It's endless. Like every day you can stay inspired just by listening to like random music made by people, right? Right. And that in itself, I think it's not punk as in like, hey, you know, like F you, you know, F school. You know, it's not like that kind of a thing. It's more of a, like, I think making progress, like, hey, I don't want to do the same thing that we've done last year. Right. You know, I don't want to do the same K-pop that, you know, maybe NCT did this year. I want to kind of take it up a notch next year.
Right.
You know, like push it forward. I think that's punk. That's like being an artist, right?
It's very brave.
Even as a musician writing for a big company, you need to have some backbone. Like you can't just be like, hey, you know, like when you say jump, I say how high, you know, like this kind of like bending over backwards for A&Rs. In which most cases, like they don't even know the culture. Like, you know, they just hear references and they're sending you references after references to make songs, right? And you know, like you have to bring sort of some of your own kind of uniqueness to it. Otherwise, you know, you're gonna sound like just like the reference, right? And believe it or not, a lot of songs are exact ripoff of like references. Like we've all heard them.
Yeah, I think that is the risk. So like the reason why people do that, and I've done that in the past many times, like to basically write a replica of the song, is because like the other option that you're really presented with is you're taking a huge risk. Like you can be safe and be in the ballpark of what they're asking for, but we all know that that's probably not even gonna place. Yeah, because like they're like, we don't need the same song, and they're gonna receive like 500 other songs that are similar to that. But the other end of it, the alternative is you can have a very hard miss. Like you can miss very hard. And you got to choose one of two paths. You can miss very softly. You know, you can make a song that's similar to what they're asking for. And then you're like, oh, I guess it just didn't work out. Or you can just kind of be like, no, I think this is what could really work. And it hurts more if they were to be like, nah. But that's like that's the area. That's the arena that you enter to possibly actually get cuts. I feel like, you know, like, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I kind of feel like that's the risky area that you hard miss and hard hit.
Yeah. It's there's always the possibility of a miss. It's like, I think there's like, if you write the most safest song, it can still be a hard miss, right? Like, right. So might as well go hard, you know, like, and usually when you do something unique and it's good, if they don't use it, somebody else always picks it up. And oftentimes, like I had songs where like one artist didn't like it at all. And then I was like, okay, give it to another artist. And it was like the number one song. Like, you know, and then the other person's like, hey, how come you didn't send me that song? I'm like, what do you mean? I sent that to you. Like your A&R is like rejected that. They're like, oh, what? You know, so, you know, I think like, yes, stay in the realm, like stay in the vicinity of what they're looking for. You know, obviously if they're going to ask you for a pop song, you don't want to go off and make like a rock, you know, like rock ballad. Right. But like, at least like kind of push it a little bit, like
exactly.
Make it cooler than the usual. Right. Cooler than your last track. Like let's up the game. You know, when we talked with Mike Daly last week, right? Last episode was that like he wants to make the next track hotter than the previous, like take it to the next level every single time, right? And that's what I respect about you know, producers like Mike, who are just constantly trying to make things better and push it forward, right? And I get really frustrated watching people just kind of staying in that zone, so afraid to get out, like do the same arrangement like for like 20 years, like yo, dude, like you know, like watch some TV, listen to some radio, listen to some Spotify. There's like a whole world out there outside your little bubble, right? You know, creatively, like, you know, and a lot of people come out of music schools, they learn classical, you know, just very like there's a million people who are doing the same ballad genre in Asia, like not just Korea, like Taiwan, Hong Kong. It's the same sounding songs, like, you know, at least in the ballad genre, right? And then there's people like us who are doing more like the pop, more like the, you know, like the K-pop or like, you know, C-pop or metal or whatever. We're doing like the title cuts. We're doing things with concepts, right? And it's a different ball game with that, you know. And with what we're doing, we could always bring in our kind of DNA and kind of like our imprint into whatever we're doing, right?
Yeah, I feel like that is the thing that a lot of, let's say like beginner producers, they're not quite understanding yet. Meaning that there's always talk about, you got to put your head down and do the work. You got to grind. You got to never give up. You got to outwork everybody. And they're like, I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do that. And everyone, so many people are willing to do that, whether they really are or not. But are they willing to do the riskier thing, like above that, which is like put your creativity out there? Like when you make songs, put yourself in a position where someone might literally think you're an idiot. Because they're like, dude, this beat is, I've never heard anything like it in a bad way. Like, like put yourself in a position to possibly receive that type of criticism. And I would say they should do that, because that's also the realm that they would get cuts from. If they were to be so creative and make a beat where someone's like, I've never heard a beat like this in a good way, you know, then you got to cut. But you know, so many people are willing to drop everything, go to California, you know, become a record producer because they're willing to not sleep. They're willing to, you know, clean, you know, like toilets and all that. And I respect that. You know, that's very respectable. You're willing to do a lot of hard work for that for a very long time and sacrifice your time, your friendships, your relationships, whatever. But at the same time, there's the other element of it. It's like, yeah, but are you willing to risk your ideas being seen as stupid? Because like that's also very crucial to have as well. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, and you could be very busy running around in circles, you know.
My inclination is to overproduce. So nowadays, like as of like maybe a couple years ago, maybe just a year ago, I started to realize that about myself. And I mean, that's another thing too. It's just like just always self-assessing as a creative, like seeing where you have to kind of like, you know, nip the bud out here and there and recorrect yourself and like recalibrate yourself into what you want to be. And for me, that thing that I had to kind of nip was I tend to overproduce because there's so many melodic harmonic ideas I want to implement into a beat. Let's say there's a great drum part, drum arrangement that you made. Like, oh man, this bass line is going to be crazy right here. You put that on there. I'm like, oh, on top here in the high register, this counter melody will be so smart to do, so clever to do. And on top of that, you're like, oh, I need to put these chords here because it implies this. You're getting like crazy deep in the rabbit hole there. And then before you know it, you listen to the final product. In your mind, you're like, see all those ideas? And someone else is like, I don't get it. And it's like that. It's lost in translation because you're trying to show off your genius, quote unquote. You're trying to show off like, oh, look at what I'm able to do. When it's really about communicating simple ideas. It's a language. Music is a language, and you're trying to convey a message within a span of 3.5 minutes or so. Can you just do it? Can you just do it simply in an effective way and not try to be like, hey, but like, check this out though. Like these little like subtexts, like these little messages that are hidden there. Like you could do that, but is it effective? Can you do it effectively? And I always think that the answer to that is it is effective if you can minimize as much as possible, reduce as much as possible. So that the main points are very clear.
Yeah, we had you know, Bob Horn on the show that, you know, and he talked a little bit about that, you know, overproducing, you know, and just like what you were saying, I feel like you know, a great producer is also able and capable of actually seeing things that can be pulled away. And I think really that's what a producer's job is, you know, and when they see the picture and they go, all right, this is a great solo, and you have, you know, 10 amazing guitar solos, but there's one that should stay and the rest can go, you know. And if you are able to kind of strip it down, and so that the audience or the, you know, the public can actually hear the ideas and you know, really understand the storyline, and I think that's a really good producer. And I think these things have to be balanced, because I feel like I don't want to confuse people, because we're talking about how we should go beyond the limits, but then at the same time, we have to also be able to manage and pull away and take things away as well. But it really is a balance, and it can't just be random. And I think this is something that we talked about the other week. It's the worst when there's songs that are just random, right? Because a lot of people think that, well, then, I'm just going to start guessing now. And I think there's nothing worse than someone just guessing and hoping for the best. And as Jae Hyung said, you're just going to end up running in circles. So definitely, I think we do need to study and understand and how to really navigate, as a producer, because then, you understand the balance between the two.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit psychological as well, because I noticed about myself earlier on when I was like learning how to produce and stuff. The reason for a lot of my overproduction had to do with insecurity. It had to do with like, what if those 4 core instruments are just not enough? They're just like not good enough ideas. The sounds are not good enough. It's not effective enough. If they were to just play by itself, it wouldn't be catchy enough. So I have to layer it with all these little sprinkles, these little ear candies everywhere, so that even if it wasn't enough, someone would listen to it and be like, oh, but that's cool. And it's like, that's just not how songs work though. It's like, you can't compensate something bad by adding more. And it's just like, it's just not the way it goes. But I feel like a lot of people tend to do that. Of course, there might be other reasons for doing overproduction, but I feel like a lot of times for producers, it has to do with insecurity. It's just not enough. It's just not enough. But the real challenge is, can you make an unforgettable beat using 4 or 5 instruments? Like, can you do that? And if you can do that, and it's an absolute banger, then like, I think you're there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I used to overproduce when the singer wasn't very, very good. Like I think like a lot of producers want to just fill that space up, right? So we just kind of like, I know minimal approach is very effective too. I think, but it requires different types of musicianship for that. And I think even like creative freedom, I don't think it's for everybody. But what we consider creative freedom for some people is absolute confusion. Like you're giving somebody a task that they have no clue about, right? So it does come with experience and knowing, kind of like I was listening to Rick Rubin's interview about like how he could kind of like, he doesn't know how to play the instruments or work the soundboard, but like he just knows what works and what doesn't, and like he decides very quickly on that. Yeah. Right. And he knows this, and he trusts his taste 100%. That comes with experience. Right. And I think in terms of musicianship and being able to like program beats, I mean, like a lot of people could do that, but like ultimately it comes down to the taste, right? The taste maker. Taste is everything to me. Like there's millions of like, thousands of kids coming out of music schools every year that could just rip every instrument, like to shreds. I mean, they could play every instrument like the best, right? But it ultimately comes down to the taste and the timing and everything that kind of plays with it. But like really, like being able to call the shots and know what you think is gonna work, and you're 100% behind it, and you can commit to that idea, right? That's what makes you a producer versus a beat maker or just a guitar player, and like as people say, I think David Foster said it best. He said, "That's why I make the big bucks." right? Yeah. And that's really like the person who makes that call. Like, okay, the recording is done. Right? Somebody who could say we're finished with the song. That's the producer, right? That's the producer's job. And for us to have that taste and be like a source of trust for artists, they could come to us for an opinion or on their album, or maybe just like oversee their production and see and make sure everything's on the right track, right? And that's what makes I think a producer what we are.
What is an underrated tool that is indispensable for your workflow?
I don't know. I don't think I personally have anything. I think maybe some coffee. I definitely have like something I do before I get in the office and start working. Like, I mean, you guys already know I usually go for a run or at least a walk. Because when I listen to the references, when I listen to songs, I don't want to listen to the songs being distracted by this and that. I want to be in a state of like I want to be in a state of suffering. Like, let's say I'm running. I want to be in a state of suffering so that I would rather think about something else. And the only thing that I could think about is the music that's playing in my head. It's like that way you kind of get this unfiltered, pure presentation of what they're trying to show you. You know, like when you're like just sitting around in the house and stuff. I mean, for me, like I can easily get distracted by this and that while listening to the song. I'm technically listening to the song, but my focus is like what I'm looking at. You know, like someone might want to talk to me, like something like that. I just want it to be no distractions. So when I listen to it, I'm like surgical about it. I'm like, oh, they tend to do this. Oh, that's a weird sound. Is that what they're looking for? Like, I really try to dissect it and understand and get a perspective on what I'm trying to do. And then I decide that that is the perspective I'm going to take. And, you know, mind you, that could be a wrong perspective. I might be wrong about it, but at least I'm deciding to take that perspective. And I tend to decide better once I know the facts. So I collect my facts in that time.
No, there's a lot of gems that were dropped here, but any advice for our viewers out there?
Well, for which viewers though, you know?
Our viewers.
Because I mean, like what state are they in? Because for me, I always consider myself like, I'm just beginning. Like I'm a baby. I just came out of the womb in K-pop terms. Like, you know, no matter how old I am, no matter how long I've been in the industry, in terms of like me hitting a stride and like knowing certain things and like realizing certain things that work and don't work, like I was just born. And so like, that's kind of how I feel about it. But I do feel like the way to even get to that point of like starting to realize certain facts about like, oh, this is like current, this is good, this is something that would translate well in this generation, right? Because all art, all music is time sensitive. I would just say listen to as much music as possible and do critical listening. Like music is expression, and you have to take in what they are trying to express. It's not just only about the melody. It's not just about the lyrics. It's about how the lyrics and melody is presented to you. What's the platter it's presented on? Who is it being presented to? If there's a certain genre of music that you don't necessarily vibe with, like think about why it does vibe with certain people, what demographic it vibes with, and try to see the merits of that as well. You know, it's like your skill set could widen so much as long as you are open to the possibility of you liking so many things. And it's, you know, so many people are culprits of this in music. They tend to just like the music they like. Like, well, that's my style. I like everything but country, right? How many times have you heard that? Like, have you heard all country music? Like, country music is amazing. There's amazing country music out there. Like, don't just write things off just because you want to identify yourself as like, this is just like my style. I don't like that. Music is not about that. It's like, you have to take it in. It's a form of art to be enjoyed in all styles. So that will make you instantly a better songwriter, a better producer. Why? Because it shapes your taste. It shapes your preference. It shapes your thinking, and it rearranges the tools in your toolbox. So once you sit down to write again, all of a sudden you're a changed person. Like your perspective is just different. It's through a different lens. It's through multiple lenses you haven't seen before. So just keep an open mind and open heart and listen to a lot of music.
That's great. Conway Twitty was my intro to country.
Hell yeah. Legend.
All right, cool. Anything you would like to plug? For example, your social media, any announcements, something coming up in the future?
Social media. You can find me on Instagram. It's samUIL, so SAMUILEE. And give me a follow. Hit me up in the DMs. Follow you right back. You know, people that are trying to produce, send me beats. Let me listen to it. Be open to, you know, constructive criticism if you want to collaborate. Because I certainly am. So let's all be a student of the game.
Like Pablo Picasso said, learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist. I think it's great that looking to find ways to not only just develop your taste, but through that, come up with ways that we can just kind of revolutionize just music it is today. So hope you guys enjoy this one. Make sure you guys visit KAIROSmusicgroup.com and check out Kairos's sample pack titled Paradox. And if you sign up now, it is free. So make sure you check the links below, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Woo!